Hey, happy Thanksgiving. I hope that you're having a nice break. Here is part 2 of the EOC practice test. I'm going to be going over numbers 16 through 30. So for numbers 16 through 18, you're given a passage, and you have part 1 for questions 16 through 18, and it's about the production of cyanide from clover, where if herbivores consume the clover can produce cyanide to protect themselves. So notice when herbivores do consume the clover and the clover does produce cyanide, it interferes with the ability of the mitochondria to use oxygen during respiration. So it has a model here of the cristae of the inner membrane of the mitochondria. So remember, we have our electron transport chain here. So we see electrons going down the electron transport chain, and that is helping energize and pump hydrogen ions. And then those hydrogen ions diffuse through the enzyme of ATP synthase, and we produce our ATP. So question 16 is looking at the inner membrane of the mitochondria, and it's asking you which model correctly represents the effect of cyanide on respiration in herbivores that consume the clover. So the correct answer here is B, because we want to find something that interrupts the use of oxygen, which B models that. So if you see the flow chart here, oxygen entering the mitochondria, remember water and carbon dioxide and ATP are all products of respiration, and so oxygen is not going to be used here to produce water. And then if we're not getting oxygen, then we're not going to get that maximum amount of ATP production. So B is the correct answer. Remember also, carbon dioxide production doesn't happen in the electron transport chain. It happens in the Krebs cycle, which is before the electron transport chain. Going down to 17, I have a model there of climate versus the production of the cyanide from the clover. And you have the clover in black and the herbivores in white there. And so you're looking for, in question, 17, which graph best predicts the change in the herbivore population in warmer climates where clover is most common. And so looking at those, the correct answer is going to be D. So when it is in cooler weather, you're going to have more amount of herbivores because there's a low amount of clover, so that produces, so it doesn't affect the herbivores that eat the clover, so they're going to have a higher amount of herbivores. But in warmer weather, notice the clover is higher and the herbivores are lower because there's more clover, and so they're not eating it, or they are eating it and be getting that toxin. So the correct answer is D. Question 18 still goes with part 1 of that paragraph as well, and it asks which is the most likely statement about the metabolic impact of cyanide production on clover plants. I do think this one is tricky, because you wouldn't think that if the clover is producing the cyanide, it's protected not to be harmful to it as well. But clover are organisms, they're living, and so they also need energy, and they use the mitochondria and respiration for that energy. And so the correct answer is B. It is also toxic to the clover plants because they also use that enzyme, that cytochrome C oxidase, for electron transport. So it's going to interrupt the use of oxygen as well for them if they do have to release that cyanide, that toxin. Questions 19 through 21 are for part 2, and we get into some genetics here. So I'm really glad that we did that dihybrid before we left for Thanksgiving break, because you would need that here. So one thing that you could do for 19 is that it says there's 2 different genes that control the production of the cyanide. One is a precursor, the gene A, which is dominant to the recessive, and then gene L, which is for the enzyme. So on 19, it gives you some genotypes. So clover plants that are heterozygous for both genes, so that'd be like big A, big L, little l, are crossed with clover plants that are homozygous recessive for both genes. So that would be little a, little L, little l. And so what you would do is you can cross your A's and then cross your L's separately. So you could do a cross of big A crossed with little a, and you're going to be looking for plants that produce cyanide. And in order for those plants to produce cyanide, they have to have at least one of each of the dominant genes, so like a big A and a big L. So you would be looking for big A or big A little a in your results. And if you do the A's together from each set of parents there, you're going to get 50% of their offspring are going to have that precursor of big A, little a. And same thing with the L's. You would cross big L with little l, and you also get 50%, which is also a half. So it says that they produce 300 seeds, and you're looking for how many can produce cyanide. Well, if you have a half from your big A, little a's, and you also have a half from your big L, little l's, that is 1/2 times 1/2 is a fourth. So you would take a fourth of 300, and that gets to be B of 75. Number 20, you're looking for genotypes. And so you're looking for which are the genotypes of the parent. So it says 2 parental plants are crossed and produce 240 F1 plants. All the F1 plants produce cyanide precursor, but only half of them produce the enzyme. So you're looking for the genotypes of the parents that could give you all the offspring have big A as their first letter, but only half of their offspring have big L as their first letter. And that genotype ends up being D. And you can work those out by trial and error through Punnett squares. Now, 21 is something we did not get to go over. And these are called pedigrees. So pedigrees are genetic family trees. And you will always have a key. So you can see keys over here. So shaded in typically means that they have the trait, and not shaded in means they don't have the trait. And so you can see the Roman numerals over here. These are generations. You have generation 1, generation 2, and then generation 3. Males are squares and circles are females. A horizontal line means that they mated to reproduce, and what comes off of them is their offspring. So you're looking for a pedigree that correctly identifies the inheritance of the enzyme. And so we would want, if they're affected, that means they have at least a capital L as their genotype. And so going through these, again, it says trial and error, and I would recommend kind of giving these genotypes. A does not work for a couple of reasons. One is this reason here. Both of these individuals will be little l, and so they cannot produce an offspring that has a capital L like this one. Same thing over here. So that's wrong. B is also going to be wrong. Here and here. So these parents would be both little l's because they don't have the enzyme. But how did they produce an offspring that does have a capital L? And same thing here. So that would be wrong. C is going to be the correct answer. Everything works out well in C. We know this is a capital L, and then something, probably both of these are heterozygous, so like big L, little l, because they produce an offspring that's little l. So this one works out. C is your correct answer. D is going to be wrong because of right here. Both these parents can be heterozygous, which makes sense. All their offspring could be little l. That makes sense. But here and here, if we have two parents that are homozygous recessive, how are their parents getting a dominant trait? So C is the correct answer on 21. Moving down to 22, talking about absorption of nutrients. So it says, which organelle performs a similar function for cells there with absorption of nutrients and breaking down things? That's going to be the lysosome. Remember, the lysosome helps digest and break down materials. 23 is a multiple select. So you're looking for characteristics that help support the argument that viruses are more similar to living components than non-living, which we argued against or for early on in the semester. So your two correct answers would be A and E. E was controversial. That was like a maybe for us. We know viruses are not made of cells. We know they don't need energy, and they have to reproduce with a host. So B, C, and E we can eliminate, and you're left with A and E for 23. 24 we definitely talked about with legumes and nitrogen fixation. So it's asking if those root nodules were prevented from forming, what would be the outcome, basically? And that correct answer would be C. Remember, these root nodules have that symbiotic bacteria that helps fix nitrogen because we can't, or living things can't use atmospheric nitrogen. It's not a usable form, so those bacteria in those root nodules help fix it. And so if those root nodules were taken away from those legumes, usable nitrogen wouldn't be available for the soil, not for plants, and then not for herbivores, etc. And so the correct answer would be C. Moving down to 25, it's a multiple select. This is looking at our central dogma. And so correct answers here for 25 are B, C, and E. Remember, mRNA, or that messenger RNA, carries genetic information from the nucleus to the cytoplasm. C, remember, tRNA transfers amino acids. And then rRNA is found in the ribosome, which is the location for protein synthesis or translation. 26, looking at most likely events that would occur for succession. You could probably narrow it down between A and B. A colony is going to be a larger group, which would come after the coral polyps. So correct answer on 26 is B. And if we were looking at sequence here, it'd really go B, A, C, D. B is the first event that would occur. Then lastly, 27 through 30, you have about glucose transport. And these questions really look this review on active and passive transport. And so 27 has a model here, and we can see glucose, and we can see these membrane-bound proteins that are helping the glucose get inside the cell. So we're looking for which one best supports facilitated diffusion. And remember, facilitated diffusion is a form of passive transport, but it's facilitated because it's going to use one of these proteins to help the molecules get in. And so for 27, the correct answer is A. The movement of glucose across the membrane does not require ATP. It is still diffusion, so they're still moving from an area of high concentration to an area of low concentration. 28, I was looking for active transport there. Now, B might be an easy target, but it's not correct because we're still going area of high to an area of low, which we know is not active transport, even though we see ATP being used there. C might also be a correct answer, but it's not because we're going low to high, which is active, but I don't see any ATP being used. So D is our correct answer. We're going low to high, and we see ATP being used. 29, looking at carbon dioxide by diffusion. The diffusion is going to be a form of passive transport, and the correct answer is A there. We're going to move down that concentration gradient from an area of high carbon dioxide to an area of low carbon dioxide. And lastly, 30, we're looking at flow charts here. And so we're just seeing which flow chart is correct. A is not correct because facilitated diffusion does not require energy. It should go over here. B is the correct model. All of those make sense. C is not correct. All of this is messed up down here. And then D is not correct because active transport does require energy, and all these are messed up over here as well. So hopefully this has helped for the second part of 16 through 30 on that practice EOC.